Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support on GunGuyTV. I'm very grateful that you support us the way you do. I am very fortunate to have Rick Travis with me today from CRPA, the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Rick is going to give us an update on what's happening in California where the Second Amendment is concerned. There's so much to talk about that I'm just going to turn this over to you, Rick, and let you do it and get out of your way, okay? So you go right ahead.
Thank you for having me on, Joel. And to the audience, thank you for listening. It's important that you do today because what we're talking about is the battleground. There have been a lot of people in our community that haven't been sure if there really is a battleground. If you're not sure now, you better wake up because we now have a governor and several key assembly members and Senate members saying that they have destroyed the National Rifle Association here in California and that they're coming for even more. So people like me for years, and Joel and others have been arguing and telling the public this is never gonna stop. Being nice and saying, oh, let's compromise here or there, that will solve it, they won't keep coming after us. Well, today, folks, I'm gonna demonstrate over and over and over again how they have been coming after us and they keep coming after us. And one of the best bills to start this discussion off, Joel, with is Assemblyman Gibson's AB 879, the precursor parts bill. This is a bill that had been in front of Governor Brown several times. Governor Brown was logical and intelligent enough to say this wasn't necessary and to get rid of it. However, Gavin Newsom signed it this last weekend. And let's talk about what kind of nightmare this makes, not just for the Department of Justice, not just for us as the end user, but also for law enforcement. This whole thing is a nightmare. What this is built upon is a failure of the system. Governor Newsom and others got through the idea that on what had been called the ghost gun, that you had to get a serial number on that lower part and had to dross and go through the whole process. Now what they want is a serial number on every precursor part. The problem is, you know, Joel, is every year you and I go to places like SHOT Show and we get to see a gazillion new parts. So which of these parts are a precursor part? There is no definition. So which of them have to have a serial number to come to California? And how in the world are you ever going to get that taken care of and teach law enforcement? How is DOJ going to manage that? There is no system. There's no financing for the system. The only thing this does is it makes people like you and me illegal, and we don't even know when we are or aren't illegal because they don't know what a precursor part is.
Now, I guess I have a question, Rick, and that is with the whole precursor parts. Look, here, the other nightmare of the system, it seems to me, is we already have a background check for ammunition that isn't working. I don't know how many people I've run into who can't seem to buy ammunition because they keep getting denied, and there's no reason to deny them. So if we now can't buy a spring to replace in our pistol or a new trigger for our AR or some other part that may have malfunctioned, or maybe we just want to buy a different muzzle brake or whatever the case might be, are you telling me those things all are going to have to be serialized potentially?
We don't know. And this is the whole issue. I mean, this is a Department of Justice that has over 10,000 felons out there and does not have the money to go after them. It's 10,000 felons carrying firearms, true bad guys, not the good guy with the gun. These are the bad guys with guns. They know where they live. They know they have firearms that they're not allowed to have that are illegal, but they don't have the human resources to go after those people. This, as you clearly stated, is a DOJ that right now is incapable and doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon of running the ammunition background system correctly and not making mistakes and not holding up everybody. This is a DOJ that does not know because they didn't want this. They asked for it not to happen. And once again, the legislature just writes up a piece of legislation that has no idea what's in the system, has no idea how the system works, places it in there, and now further confounds the issue of an overworked, understaffed, underknowledge DOJ trying to enforce the law, which puts the average Californian who is a lawful citizen who just wants the parts for their firearms so they can fix them when they break, so they can upgrade it, so they can wait for it, actually make their firearms safer, which is what the politicians on the left claim they want. And yet they've thrown a huge roadblock into the system.
You know, it's interesting. I just had a company today ask me if I would test some of their parts. and these parts are for ARs. And I said, well, I'm in California. I don't know how I'm going to do that. In order to actually test them to see if they work properly, I would have to then drive all the way to Yuma and have them shipped to Yuma so that I can put them together. I mean, I'm already storing the AR that I have in California as a separate upper, lower, separated with the bolt carrier group out of it, because I'm concerned about DOJ knocking on my door.
Right.
So now we're afraid to have our guns in one piece. We're afraid to have them in the safe where they belong, or someplace where we could get them to use them to defend ourselves. We can't buy ammo without having somebody look up our dress to make sure that we're safe or whatever. And now I can't buy a part.
And I'm glad you brought up the point about, the fear that all of us have of DOJ showing up at the doors, law-abiding citizens, and wanting to, break that front area and come after us. And that's why I put that point that within the app system of knowing where there are known felons with firearms, again, over 10,000, why would you choose to waste the resources to go after a potential good guy, somebody has done nothing wrong, made up on some trumped up piece of legislation, versus going after the convicted felons who are out and have firearms and you know where they're at?
So when does this law actually come into effect?
January 1st.
Oh, nice. We have so much, and of course, I'm assuming at this point, as you said, there's no list of what somebody somewhere, DOJ has to now determine what in their minds constitutes a precursor part.
Right, and that was one of the things that was in testimony. DOJ said, hey, we don't have the background or the knowledge base to be able to differentiate between what is and what is not a precursor part. Of course, the policy wonks that write this stuff up, and stuff is a polite word for it, they have no idea of anything firearms related. This is all a fluff piece of legislation that was originally designed to make Assemblyman Gibson look like he was being tough on firearms, but in fact what he has done is created, as I said before, a nightmare. Because think of all the new widgets. When is a drop-in piece a precursor or not a precursor? Just you and I could debate that all weekend long.
Well, okay, yeah. The firearms industry is just not going to sell them in California.
Right. And
because
that's part of the overall goal that people aren't understanding. And one of my headaches in this is I've got shotgun guys that are like down in San Diego, up in the Central Valley, that all they do is shoot doves and ducks. And they're like, well, this doesn't impact us. Not yet. But later on, as we talk, you're going to see where other things are impacting them. And you've been preaching this, and I've been preaching this, but people have to realize an attack anywhere within the Second Amendment community is an attack on all of us.
Well, it's going to, when you need a part for your shotgun because your shotgun just broke,
right?
That's going to impact you. When you need a part for your 22 because all you do is go plinking and your 22 broke, that's going to impact you. This is an effort simply, and I mean, this is just my opinion, but this is an effort to simply make exercising the Second Amendment as absolutely difficult as possible to the point where it becomes impossible. I don't think it has anything to do with regulating firearms or protecting people or whatever. It's about destroying the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. That's all it is.
Joel, it's directly about fulfilling Gavin Newsom's promise to the left that he would eradicate the culture of gun ownership in this state and then take it nationwide. And that's one of the things that's also frustrating is a lot of people are like, okay, I'm done with California, I'm going elsewhere. Well, folks, look at Boise, Idaho. They're becoming like California. Look at Austin, Texas, becoming like California. Because if we don't stop this junk here, we're not going to stop it going nationwide.
Well, they're all becoming like California. The other day, a gentleman said to me that, what did he say? That it's my fault. I'm a Californian. I voted these people in. And so it's all my fault because, and he's talking about me and Californians in general. It's our fault because we voted them in. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'll blame you. He said, just don't bring it to Texas. And I said, well, that's what's happening is it's coming to Texas. And when Texas looks like California, I'm going to blame you.
Right.
Whether it's your fault or not, I'm blaming you. But I'm going to say you did it. He didn't like that. So what they got to understand is there are people in California that are law-abiding citizens that are very pro-Second Amendment, pro-Constitution. We're just outnumbered. That's the problem.
And I don't believe we're outnumbered. I believe we are apathetic, because I just got done speaking to a group of Democrats up in the Central Valley that are all 2A people, all gun owners, and are sick and tired of what's going on in Sacramento. But the irony was, as I've talked to them, and I've talked to Republicans at the convention, I've talked to people from different political parties in between, we have 2A people throughout every political ideology. The problem is, when I go, did you vote? Silence. And there's the problem. Because even DOJ at the light end says we have 8 million of us that are still in this state that own firearms of voting age. If 8 million of us actually show up at a poll.
Which brings up the question, why don't they vote? The only thing I can think of is either they're just apathetic, as you said, or they're to the point where they think their vote doesn't mean anything, so why bother? In which case, what they've done is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now their vote doesn't mean anything because they didn't bother to cast it. So, I mean, what do we do now? How do we fight these things now? It's one thing to talk about them and say that how horrible they are, which they are, but what's next, I guess, is on the agenda here.
Well, before I get to the next bills, I mean, one of the things that I am pushing, especially in an election year that is very different from previous election years, our primary is not in June, it's in March, which is less than 6 months away, is trying to get people to understand you're voting even when you don't vote. And I want people to understand what I'm saying. You're voting even when you don't vote. If you don't cast your vote for something, you've cast it against it, because your silence adds to the opposition.
That's true. That's absolutely true. You know, when it comes time to vote for president, because I never vote the way California goes, I do feel like my vote is meaningless, but I do it. I cast it anyway, because you just never know. Well, and besides which, I don't want to be in a position of kind of arbitrarily negating myself and casting the vote for the other guy. You know what I mean? So yeah, I agree with you. But you know, even so, all the elections in California could be overturned if people would just vote. And we wouldn't, the Democrats wouldn't, the anti-gunners would not have, I don't care what you call them. The people that are against our Second Amendment wouldn't have a supermajority in the legislature if all the gun owners voted to protect their Second Amendment.
Well, and here's where it starts, and people don't think about this, but as you said, you vote, obviously, in the presidential election that's coming up in 2020. But you also are voting in statewide elections, county elections, city elections, and sometimes even more local than that. Every one of our votes, whether it's for the person that's going to run the pound, the water district, the sanitation district, all the way up that chain, those people are politicians. Once they're elected to those positions, they're going to move up that food chain. We can stop them at the bottom. We can reshape that. That's what our opposition did to us over the last 25 years, was they said, fine, we'll let your Republicans and your conservatives and your pro-2A people from both parties retire out. But what we're going to do is start grabbing all the local city councils, all the counties, every single board, and stacking it with our people. And now that's why we go to, fair boards, we go to city ordinances, and we're fighting at every level, because we, the people, the Second Amendment people, are not voting in those smaller elections. And every vote there does count. I mean, if you look at how many votes are cast statewide for like the governorship, and then you look at how many come from a county, you're going to find less than 10% of those people vote for their county sheriff. They just don't vote. And yet the county sheriff decides your CCW.
Well, I think it's more than that.
Right.
We just recently had, as far as local elections are concerned, within the last, I would say, 8 months, maybe a year, maybe it's been a year, there was a gentleman in the city of El Cajon who, while home, heard a ruckus outside, thought he saw somebody breaking into his truck but wasn't sure, called 911, picked up a pistol to defend himself if he had to, and went outside to see what was happening. The guy that's burglarizing the truck then comes after him, and he shoots the guy. Well, the bad guy, the criminal, dies. He got in his own vehicle and crashed down the street a little bit. I thought it was interesting because when when I watched the interview that the news had with, I think he was a lieutenant who was investigating the case, asked him what he thought was what was her thoughts on it. And he said, well, you're in El Cajon. If you want to burglarize people or break into their cars or things, you might want to know that some of them have guns and they just might shoot you. Now, why do you suppose that is? Because El Cajon has a conservative mayor. They have a fairly conservative city council. Who hires the police chief?
Right.
The mayor and the city council. Right. So what do you get? You get a mayor. They're going to hire somebody like them.
Correct. And
that attitude toward civilians' right to defend themselves, or rights in general, then rolls downhill from that mayor and city council to the police chief, to the assistant chief, to the captains, to the lieutenants, and all the way down to the officers. I got to tell you, if that guy had been located in a neighboring city called La Mesa, he'd have probably gone to jail.
Right.
As it was, he didn't. So it does make an enormous difference. Your city council, your mayor, your county supervisor. Right now we have a county supervisor election going on. Joel Anderson is running out here. We got a bunch of other people running. Your local assembly member. I've talked to people who don't want to vote for assembly or for state representatives because they figure it's a waste of time. Well, it's not a waste of time. Okay, the ones that would be for us are outnumbered right now, but we can change that by electing other people. Right?
Right, and you can change it by making them feel uncomfortable. Remember earlier I said not voting is a vote for the other side. I can tell you when we've been able to get members and get people in the public that are pro-2A to show up at the local, not the state, at the local office of an assembly member or senator complaining and wanting to make appointments to talk to the chief of staff at that local office, that funnels directly up to that member. And we have watched members not vote. And when they don't vote, bills die. And that means that's a win.
I have to admit, I never thought about it. I've never thought about that. I really didn't. However, right. So it applies at the state legislature level too. If you can talk them into not voting, then the bill dies as opposed to getting approved.
And that's what happens. I mean, all the time we will see opposition groups show up at assembly members who may be on the fence or maybe even be pro-2A, and they make such a ruckus, and none of our people show up to support or to complain the opposite direction. So at the end of the day, let's be honest, an assembly member or senator wants to keep their job. And so if they see this other group as having the numbers to threaten that, they're going to cave.
I found it interesting just on a local level with our county sheriff in San Diego. His name is Bill Gore. For many, many years, I've taught the concealed carry course here in San Diego for a long time. For many years, he was very strict about to whom he would issue a permit. He issued them, but they would try to talk you out of it and try to make it difficult on you. And if they knew they needed 5 or 6 documents from you, and they knew you were way up in North County in Fallbrook or something, they'd ask for them one at a time, knowing you had to make the 2-hour-and-a-half trip all the way down to deliver them and back, just in the hopes of frustrating you enough that you'd either give up or lose your temper in the sheriff's office. And of course, if you lose your temper in the sheriff's office, well, I'm sorry, you don't have the proper temperament to have a concealed.
Right.
And one way or the other, you don't get one. Then it comes time for Bill Gore to get reelected. He's been sued by Ed Peruta and lost and finally was, sort of kind of prevailed. It comes time to get reelected, and town hall meeting after town hall meeting, he's getting his hat handed to him over this issue.
Right.
Let's say he's getting his butt handed to him over this issue. And to the degree that he didn't change the policy completely to shall issue, but I got to tell you, he is much more open to issuing now than he ever was before. And I see people getting permits on a regular basis that would never have gotten a permit previously. So the fact that he took so much heat really made a difference.
Yeah, we've seen that throughout the state. When you get local groups that show up at these town halls and do an effective job of being professional and explain their positions and their points, politicians change. And we had the same thing here in Orange County with Sheriff Hutchins. She wasn't issuing, and now our county has over 20,000 from back when she barely had 1,000. That's a pretty good sized jump in numbers. And that has happened in many, many counties throughout the state where people have actually flipped. We've got counties up on the Bay Area that didn't have more than 100, and now we're up over 2,000, 3,000 in just a year and a half. So things are happening in different places, but it takes that local pressure, and it takes our people actually getting out of the easy chair and voicing their opinion in a professional way.
Well, it also takes understanding the difference between what's ideal and what's possible.
Right.
Because ideal would be we go and we pester a politician or we vote and everything changes today and all of our rights are restored right now and we're good to go and that's that. No, we don't have to fuss with it anymore. There you are, we're done. But that's not a reasonable expectation. It's not a realistic expectation.
No.
And frankly, it's not even a possible expectation. So I think as we go forward as gun owners, we have to understand we've lost our rights, particularly in states like California, we've lost them incrementally over decades. And we're going to have to regain them incrementally. We're not going to get them all at once.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of this, but want to go on, if I could, to one of the other bills that's incredibly egregious that was signed so people understand why this is such a problem.
Please do.
So Assembly Bill 61, which was put forward by Philip Ting, was an extension of the gun violence restraining orders, which are somewhat like a red flag law. And I want people to understand some things about this. Previously, the GVRO in California, which is short for gun violence restraining order, allowed family and law enforcement working in concert together to go ahead and issue one of those in case your family member was doing something erratic and had to demonstrate, because who better to know how a family member is acting than the family, and then law enforcement is the confirmation. And that system was working fairly decently. There were flaws, there were issues, there always is in any system, but now what has happened, with no impetus or reason to do this, they've extended it to anybody you've ever worked with, anybody you ever went to school with, anybody you ever might have had a relationship with. So how many of us out there realize that all of us have probably been guilty at one point or another, especially if you've been around the planet as long as you and I have, of knowing a bad breakup, whether that bad breakup was a couple or a business partnership or something else, where one side makes false claims about the other side. This is the issue we have with this new bill, is that anybody with a grudge can literally have someone's firearms taken away from them without any finding, because now they can just go to law enforcement and say, blah, 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 take them away.
Well, and there's no due process.
No.
I mean, you're not taken before, you don't get before a judge and argue your point, and you don't get to none of the Fourth Amendment rights that you have, or Fifth Amendment rights, or Sixth Amendment rights, and any of these things. Your stuff is just taken from you. You don't get to see the people that are accusing you of these things. You don't get to confront the witnesses against you. You don't get to bring your own witnesses. You don't get to do any of that. You've just lost your firearms. And my experience with the government is once they take something, getting it back is not a small a small project. It's not easy to do.
It's not. And, that's one of the things, if we look at another bill, which is your own Todd Gloria down there in San Diego, who we have been fighting and who claimed this last weekend that he had destroyed the NRA in California and other gun groups by getting the bill passed and the governor to sign to end the gun shows starting in 2021 in Del Mar. They'll still continue through 2020 because we have a lawsuit that got an injunction and won that. And we're now going to take that lawsuit and advance it to go after this new law and show how the state is still operating unconstitutionally. And we'll have more to follow on that here in the next couple of weeks. But one of the points I wanted to make was Gloria stands out there in front of the people of San Diego and says, hey, I represent the community of San Diego. I heard all of you are behind me. And you know what? Now I'm going to take this statewide and wipe out gun shows throughout the state of California. That's his goal in 2020. But I think of people like, you have an excellent gentleman down there, Gary Brennan, who runs the San Diego County Wildlife Federation, makes up over 30,000 San Diegans who patently disagree with Todd Gloria. So for him to say all is totally erroneous. And I know there's other groups down there that, like San Diego gun owners and others, who have populations that don't agree. So for Gloria to make those kinds of statements, we need to start holding him accountable and going, that's not true. We have tens of thousands of people that disagree with you, have told you we disagree. The courts disagree, which is why they granted the CRPA the case and said, yes, we could bring Crossroads of the gun show back to Del Mar, which we did last month, and that was a huge turnout. But instead, again, we've got a lot of people being silent, and we need people going down and saying, how can you say this? Can you imagine Todd Gloria right now, while he's hanging out in his office, if he had people from our community coming 2 or 3 times a week going, that's not true, I'm against this, you're not speaking for me?
Well, I think part of the problem too is for these politicians, it's ideological. It's not political. It's ideological. They have an ideology that they want to change the United States, and they want to do it state by state, city by city, however they have to do it. And they would like to, honestly, as I've talked to a couple of them, it sounds to me like they would like to do away with the Bill of Rights entirely. It's not just the Second Amendment, except for the rights that they like.
Right.
And except for when it's applied to the people they like, and except for when it's the subject matter that they agree with.
Correct.
Which is not rights. That's a dictatorship. That's an
Absolutely.
oligarchy. That's a total change in who we are as a country, and that's what these people really, really want. They want to be in power, and they want to be empowered so that they can control what everybody else does. You can't do that if you're those people when you're facing an armed population. It simply doesn't work.
Now, good news is we were able, working with other people, like I know you had Sam Prentice from Gun Owners of California. We've worked with Dan Reed, who is the lobbyist here in the state of California for the National Rifle Association, and others. We were able to stop some pretty egregious bills. But again, I want to point out to people, these are bills that previously Governor Brown had said no, not just once, not just twice, but sometimes 3 and 4 times said no. And what happened was all these bills came back because Newsom sent a message, he'd sign everything. And as a result, when we got through fighting, there were a couple of bills I want to bring up because they're going to come back. And we know they're going to come back, and we're going to fight them again. But one of them that has been coming up for the last 2 years has been a gun tax. First, it was going to be 25% of whatever the cost of the firearm was. Then they tried to get it at $25. We were able to get those stopped. So I want to let people know there are wins that are happening. I mean, we always talk about the losses, but there are wins that are happening. We're also able to stop the storage bill. And this is another example of why I agree with you that they're trying to wipe out our culture of gun ownership. But I want to point out to your listeners just how ill-informed these assembly members and senators are. Half the time when we're trying to talk to them in the hallway, they have to look to their aide and say, what's this about? And by the way, they're the author of the bill, and they don't know what it's about or how it works. And an example was the storage bill. The storage bill was designed that whenever you or I, Joel, or any of your listeners or any other person that loves the Second Amendment and goes out and exercises their rights was carrying a long gun in California, they would have to put that in a locked storage case that was attached to the frame of their vehicle. Wait for it. There are a lot of framed, no, there are no new cars with frames.
No, the last passenger car, not a pickup, the last passenger car that actually had a frame is not being used by law enforcement anymore. They're rotating them out, and it's called a Ford Crown Victoria.
Right.
The last one that has a frame, and they're being phased out, not being made anymore. The only thing that has frames now are trucks, and they better be, they have to be fairly good sized ones, 1 tons and 3/4 tons and like that.
Right. So when you look at a bill like that that's put forward, and the assembly members and senators are like, well, just attach it to the frame, and we're like, well, what car do you have? Because all of us are driving cars that have no frames. Oh, and by the way, we drive those cars because this same Assembly and Senate in California were the ones that said we need to make cars safer, and they're safer without a frame, so they collapse a little bit easier without killing us. So the irony is, either they're telling us, hey, we want you to go back to cars that kill you, or we want to remove the firearms that you go and practice with to prevent you. Either way, they want us to get killed.
That's I'm I'm half Italian, brother. I'm very seldom speechless. Okay, but I think you've done it to me this time. I am amazed. Okay, so in addition, it seems to me that Newsom signed 15 different bills or something. Can you give us a rundown? What did he
I'm going to give you a rundown on another one that is one that I think our community is missing, because it's very easy for a lot of people who are well-meaning within our community to go, oh, that's a nothing burger, when actually it's a huge item. So I'm going to try to break it down fairly quickly for people. Assembly Bill 1254 was designed and has been signed in during the middle of the hunt season to remove bobcats as an animal that could be hunted in California. So, you know, there's people that own guns, they have a kid in at home, and they're like, oh, well, bobcats are like my cat. No, they're not. Your cat has DNA from a tiger, not from a bobcat. No relation. But beyond that, let's look at something. We already have an overpopulation of bobcats. The Department of Fish and Wildlife and the California Game Commission, the two entities that monitor bobcats, told the legislature, please don't do this to us. It has nothing to do with maintaining proper populations. And if we don't have hunters as a means of conservation control over these predators, this is going to get way out of balance like we've already seen with coyotes and bears. So the result is they pass and sign 1254. So people are like, well, what does that have to do with me if I don't hunt? Here's what it has to do with. One of the greatest defenses in California for keeping your firearms rights are hunting rights. As long as there's hunters, it makes it very hard to go after a lot of your firearms. But if we remove humans being able to go after predators, then those predators will overconsume the population. We've seen this over and over. You can stay the Khabib Plateau back in Arizona during the last century, that when they outlawed the hunting of predators and they pulled hunters out of the field, the deer population exploded, then it imploded, and they lost everything. Well, once California loses everything, then California can say, well, there's no need for hunting, therefore there's no need for any firearms. And this is where they're going.
Wow. And they've made it, you know, now I feel like I have to pay for a California hunting license, even though this year I decided never to hunt in California anymore because I don't want to deal with all of the nonsense. And I probably still won't hunt in California, but I probably ought to buy a hunting license just so I can keep the numbers of hunters up, if for no other reason.
I still hunt in California just to be a pain in the rear end. But besides that...
You are a stalwart individual, my friend. Well done.
But besides that, now they're expanding this next year to come after bears and remove bear hunting in California, which is part of a nationwide plan that the left is pandering to some groups over. And they're going to go after dove hunting, which is huge in San Diego, brings a lot of tourist dollars into the state, especially to that county. And they want to ban all of that because they're trying to say that when hunters go after doves, they're going after the symbol of peace. Who would do such a thing? You know, they're trying to equate the bears, that every bear is Smokey the Bear. Who would ever want to shoot Smokey the Bear? And they're coming out with campaigns like this. And so we need the people to understand these are attacks, because where these eventually lead down the chain, and they figured this out, is wiping out all of our firearm rights. And if they can do it in California, they're going to do it nationwide. Yeah,
they are. Okay. Now, look, I don't know if they're technically related, but I just want to make sure that you understand, if you're watching this, a dove is just a little pigeon.
Right.
And if you don't like having a bazillion pigeons chasing your food when you're at the park trying to have a picnic, you don't want to have a bunch of little pigeons doing it.
Yeah.
That's why we hunt them.
Right.
Because they're like flying rats, and they populate, you know, they produce really fast. And yeah, they're cute little birds, but there's a reason why we hunt them, because if we don't, you're going to have a bunch of little mini pigeons, which are nothing more than flying rats, all over the place.
Well, and watch your food prices go up, because those mini pigeons like to eat fruits, avocados, everything else. Are going to destroy the produce in the state.
They absolutely do. I mean, matter of fact, if you can go out pretty much any time into Imperial Valley. I know I've done it many times, and talk to the feedlots out there, and they'll let you kill pigeons all day long.
Right.
I mean, whether it's legal or not at the time, I don't think really matters, because the game warden oftentimes goes, I didn't see anything, because it's costing these feedlots a fortune.
Right.
To have these pigeons constantly eating the feed. And so, you know, that's just the kind of how it works. That's why you can generally find farmers will let you kill crows until you're blue in the face, or
right.
What you want to do. It removes a pest that produces small pests at an alarming rate, and they need to be thinned out as a result. So that's kind of how it works. People need to get over that, or have to suffer the consequences. You know what happens is they'll ban it, and then they'll complain that there's too many doves. And then they'll hire professional hunters or professional dove pest removal people to go remove them, when hunters have been doing it and paying the state to do it and paying for the privilege forever. So,
well, I'm glad you bring that up, because we can go to San Diego and look at what happens down in that county. We have pigs. We have, just like most of the West, an overabundance of feral pigs who are causing problems for livestock, for people that want to go do equestrian exercises. I mean, in Norco, out in Riverside County, people can't ride down the Santa Ana riverbeds because of pigs attacking them and their horse when they're trying to use trails that have been used for better part of the last 2 centuries. And the result is now we have no hunting of hunters going after these pigs who would use the meat for their families, who would have wonderful barbecues and would be doing it humanely. Instead, we have counties like San Diego that are paying hunters via helicopter and via other methods to get paid sometimes $200–300 a pig to kill these pigs and leave them in the wild where they could become toxic, poisonous, all sorts of other things, and throwing in the trash when that food could be used elsewhere to lower the cost of the homeless feeding, to help people with cancer, other things like that, which is why we were very proud of a bill called Assembly Bill 395, which has been much maligned by the press as the roadkill bill. And it's not about roadkill, it's about animals that are dying on the highways, predominantly along 395, that meat automatically goes to a trash heap prior to this bill getting signed. And other states, like 48 of the 50, allow that meat to be used for homeless shelters, for battered children and women's shelters, for cancer. And the reason I bring up the cancer issue is there are many longitudinal studies, more than 20 years, done by wonderful universities like Harvard, et cetera, the Mayo Clinic, that show that people who eat game meat proteins have a significant, like sometimes 30–60% better chance of surviving the treatment for cancer and beating cancer than those who don't.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean,
right.
That does. Besides which, people think about roadkill as, they think about what they saw going down the road. My dad was a deputy sheriff in Columbia County, Oregon, and it was not unusual for him to find deer on the side of the road get clobbered by a car. And maybe it had been dead for 15 minutes. Maybe it had been dead for an hour. But it's important to understand that if that meat is used for the homeless, it still has to pass inspection. It still has to get through the FDA, still has to get through the USDA. It's still got to pass inspection. It can't just be handed to people to be handed to people. It's still got to be inspected to make sure that the meat is not rotten or bad or going to cause disease or whatever. It's just the difference is it got killed by a car instead of shot by a hunter.
Right. But my point is, at the end of the day, we are actually keeping jobs. We're actually lowering the cost of the taxpayer because you're not paying someone to leave the animal out there that has hunted it as a depredation kill. You're actually helping lower the cost for feeding the homeless and other people in crisis, which allows those monies to go to other programs to further help those groups. So you're starting to stop this downward spiral and at least putting the brakes on it, if not in some areas, turning it back the other direction.
Well, I mean, also, if you don't have to pay professional hunters, it's because guys like me, guys like you, buy a tag.
Right.
They pay for a hunting license. They buy a tag. They buy gear, which then has an excise tax on it, which pays for the management of wildlife. And so that money,
those are called Pittman-Robertson dollars that do that. And that's one of the things that if you look at the budget here in California, if you were to eliminate hunters across the board, we would lose over half the state parks. And that's what a lot of public people don't realize is the hunting community provides two things in California that are critical. One, our fees, like you said, on the excise taxes, which become known as Pittman-Robertson dollars, as well as our hunters' tags and fees go to do more for wildlife than everything else combined. In fact, Governor Brown, in one of his last signing statements, stated very clearly that since the 1930s, hunters as conservationists have done more than all the other, quote, conservation groups combined in this state to further and to stop the eradication of species. And yet you have people thinking that they joined this mom and pop leftist group that they're actually doing something to save animals when it's actually the reverse. It's the hunters that have actually been doing more to keep animals from going extinct than any other group in the state.
Well, and here's where it really gets bizarre, too, is the amount of money that the state thinks it's saving somehow, but is forcing out of the state. I mean, people have talked about folks that are selling their place and taking the money and moving to another state, buy a place and retire or whatever, or they're just moving out because they want to get away from the craziness and the overtaxation and the restrictions on their rights and so on. But there's also folks who stay here but don't necessarily spend money here. I mean, think about it. we, as a company, my wife and I own a business, and we have a business office address in Yuma. Well, I don't hunt pigs now in California for obvious reasons. So if I want to hunt pigs, I got to go to Texas. If I want to hunt javelina, I got to go to Arizona because they're really not around here. If I want to hunt, where did I hunt dove? I went dove hunting in Yuma because it was less hassle, and a bunch of my buddies were going, and so I went. So where am I buying those tags? Where am I buying those licenses? I'm buying them in Arizona and Texas.
Right.
Watch this. In order for me to buy the ammo here to take there, it's a pain in the butt. I have a business location in Arizona. So what do? If I'm going to be hunting in Arizona, I order some ammo and I pick it up on my way to, February, I'll be out hunting javelina in Florence, Arizona. What am I going to do? We're going to swing by Yuma. We'll pick up the ammo we ordered. It's there, and we'll go and we'll use it. And you know what? We won't have it. We can't bring it back. That's fine. I'll leave it in my office in Yuma. But there's money, again, that did not get spent in California because they're driving that money out.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
And the irony behind it is that money that they were supposed to raise was supposed to go for victims. It's not going to happen because people just aren't going to do it.
No, exactly. No, they're not going to do it. Why should they?
Right.
I mean, they've developed an attitude among Californians of why should I give California more of my money than I absolutely have to? So if I can possibly spend the money in a different state, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
I have several friends who have actually purchased properties in other states so that they can move their domicile from California to that state and live there most of the time and just keep their house in California as a second home.
Right.
Well, what happens with that? Now that their driver's license is in whatever other state, their domicile legally is in whatever state and whatever, well, guess what? Guess where their cars are registered now?
Right.
Guess where their RV and their boat is registered now? Guess where? And that is a legal thing to do as long as they spend most of the time in that state, which they do. So now you've just taken these folks who you didn't get any more money out of them in California because they didn't sell their property. So you didn't get the taxes on the sale of the house.
Right.
What you did is you lost a lot of revenue because they moved their money to another state.
Right.
And they moved their spending to another state. Anybody that's got money or any ability to do these things is doing them. There's a lot of folks that don't. I get it, but there's a lot of folks that do. You know, why do you think? Yeah, why do you think that we do business in Arizona? Because it's less money. It costs me less to do business in Arizona than it does to do business in California. So I do business here. Right. We also do business there, and California doesn't get that money.
Right. I totally understand.
Crazy. Well, what else, now that we've depressed the tar out of every viewer I have, what else is going on in this crazy state we need to know about?
Well, in the crazy state, the war is getting nastier. And it's getting nastier in an area that really concerns me because, you know, you and I have talked many, many times and tried to educate the people that listen to this that we have a government here that's trying to become a dictatorship. And one of the ways you look historically at somebody or a group of people trying to set up a dictatorship is they remove the constitutional powers from the people that had them up until that point of being removed. And if we look at constitutional officers, there are 58 of them here in California. They're called sheriffs. And one of their constitutional powers is the ability to, or not to, depending on how they view things under the law of the state, to issue CCWs, which is close to this community. So right now there is talk up in Northern California that the governor is trying to get, and he probably will, a couple of senators and assemblymen to remove that power from the sheriffs and give it to the governor of the state of California and the Department of Justice.
In which case you can kiss your concealed carry permit for the state of California goodbye.
Yes, because it will only go to friends of Newsom.
Right. That's it. And so I've had one since 1990. Don't say it. Something like that, 1989, 1990 in the San Diego County for the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. And because I had a meeting right before this, I'm sitting in my studio and I'm carrying a gun because I was carrying it when I went to the meeting I was at. I still have it on me. I haven't taken it out, put it away yet. Right. That gives you an idea. I carry a gun every day, all day, have for 40 some odd years. And then all of a sudden, guess what? You know what will happen to that permit? It won't be renewed. And all those permits Sheriff Hutchins has issued and all the permits the sheriff in San Diego is issuing will go away if that happens. And I won't be surprised if it happens because these are rubber stamped.
Well, we're working with the sheriff's offices throughout the state already to put up a fight against this. They are standing with the Second Amendment community by and large. It's well over the 58 offices. We've got about 50 of them. They're standing with us on this in this fight. We're going to continue this fight and show what it is. But we need people that listen to us to start to explain to people, though, this is a dictatorship that is on the move. And we've got to stop it by whatever legal means necessary, whether that's, I know there's people out trying to recall the governor. And so if you believe in that, then join in that fight. But we also have some good news. Now that I put the bad news, here's the good news. We have a case that goes in front of the Supreme Court that deals in New York. We're an amicus brief as the CRPA with it. So we're also a part of that case. It goes in front of the Supreme Court on December 2nd, and sometime in the spring, we expect the decision to be favorable. But that case coming down will reaffirm both Heller and McDonald and will allow us, the CRPA here in this state, to launch a series of lawsuits to start rolling back some of this egregious legislation. And what I need people to realize is, number one, like you said earlier, it's not going to happen overnight. That's going to be a 3 to 5 year battle, and we know that. It's going to cost us a ton of money. We know that. But we also know is once that decision comes down from the Supreme Court, it is going to force a Ninth Circuit that has been reconfigured under this current presidency to be almost dead even conservative liberal. It's going to force the lower courts to have a series of guidelines that will not allow some of the egregious types of decisions we've had in the past. And it's going to allow us to push back on some of these laws and get them ruled unconstitutional. So there is good news. We have seen this happen in history before in states like Texas, where it got really bad like it is in California right now, and through the series of a couple of events, turned it into being a conservative pro-2A state. We can do that again in California. What we need people to do is not give up hope and see that there is a bright, shining moment that's only about 6-7 weeks away. And that once that moment happens, then the clock starts turning the other way. A lot of people are going to hear me out there because I'm going out to raise money for those lawsuits to take back our rights.
Okay, so with that, Rick, if you don't mind, let me, and I don't, before I even say this, I don't want to go down a negative rat hole with it. There are an awful lot of folks who are not trusting of the leadership of NRA right now.
Correct.
I'm one of them. But I'm not going to go down that path. I'm still a life member of NRA, and I still stand with NRA in defense of things. But we're talking about California. We're not talking about nationally.
Correct.
I want to make this super duper clear.
Okay.
If I write a check, let's say, for example, I wanted to write a whopper check today, and I donate it to CRPA. Does NRA get that money?
None of it.
Not 1 cent.
Not 1 cent. It all stays here. In fact, if you mark it for litigation, that's the only place we will put the money is in the fight on court cases here in California designed to protect your rights that still exist and to get those back that have been taken from you.
So let me ask you a question, Rick. How long have you been with CRPA?
I've now been in my 7th year.
I don't know how many times you've been on my show, but it's been a bunch.
Yep.
I don't know how many times we've met personally. It's been several.
Right.
And oh, by the way, just in case you're watching this, I happen to like Rick a lot. He's a really good guy. Don't tell him I said that. I don't want him to get a fat head. And we'll get together at SHOT Show again.
Correct.
Do you own a $20,000 suit?
No, not one. In fact, I personally, if anybody knows me, I dislike suits.
I know, I do too, and I do know that. In fact, I actually, because of an event we had to go to, I actually bought 2 ties. Do you know how many ties I own? 2. I just bought them. You know how many times I've worn them? I wore one once. I don't know if I'll ever get to the other one or not, so I get it. All right.
The only ties I own are the ones that my daughter-in-laws made me wear for their weddings.
And there you go. So again, I don't want to go down the negative thing with NRA, but I want to make it absolutely clear. If you are watching and you would like to donate to this fight in California and you donate to CRPA, I'll let Rick say it again, what happens to that money?
That money stays here in California, fighting for California. And one of the things that we have is a series of checks and balances. You can read up on them on our website. We go through audits every year to make sure none of us are overpaid. In fact, we're some of the most underpaid people in nonprofit status here in California. And that's because we believe in the cause. None of us are making 6-digit paychecks or anything like that, including Chuck Michelle, who's the president and one of the top lawyers. He does this as a volunteer for CRPA. he gets no pay from CRPA for any of it.
In fact, I think, Rick, don't you live in Chuck's garage? You and your family,
practically,
or does he live in yours? That's what I want to know.
And we bring that up because we are like you. We're fighting for this. It's just places where we have dedicated our lives to this battle because we believe in fighting for our Second Amendment rights, but also for our First Amendment rights. Because we all here at the California Rifle Pistol Association know that if we lose the Second Amendment, all the rights guaranteed to us in the First Amendment are going to be gone within a decade, if not sooner.
Well, and that is one reason, again, to fight, to join, to fight. So if you're in California and you're not a member of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, I urge you to join. I am a life member of the National Rifle Association. I'm also a life member of CRPA. And if you have some extra you got an extra few bucks sitting around, donate it for this lawsuit. Please help out. You're thinking about sending me money, send it to them because they're the ones that are going to be doing the lawsuit. You can send me some too. I won't complain, but send it to them. They're the ones that need this money for these lawsuits. So without the money, it can't be done, to be honest with you. It just can't.
And, you know, even if people have old cars or vehicles, we've even had a plane donated. We have an organization that will help us sell it, and then that money will also be earmarked strictly for litigation purposes, so we can win these fights.
I did not know that. I've got a junker in my front yard, and I've got one on the side of my house, both of which I was going to donate. So, yeah. Rick, when we get done here, I want that information, and I will donate both of those cars for that. I want to get them out of here. They're in my way anyway, and they'll help.
You know what? I'll go ahead and email that, and then you can let your people know too.
Please do, and I'll post that. I'll post that on the GunGuyTV website. I'll also post it in the description as soon as I get it in the email description of this video. So there you go. That'll help. But I've got two vehicles I need to get rid of. I got an old Saab, and I got an old Ford, and I want to get them out of here. They're, you know, dirtying up my house, basically. So there you are. What else do we need to know that we don't know? Is there anything else we should be talking about?
Not right now, but I'd love to be back probably about a month and a half, and I'll be able to tell you a whole bunch more because there's a group of us getting together to plan out a strategy, and we would love to announce it before the end of the year.
I would absolutely be overjoyed to have you do that. And then you're going to join me for an interview on the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast in January at SHOT Show, so we'll have another update then. But honestly, Rick, we could do this once a month, and this would be awesome.
I would love to do that.
Okay, well, let's do it. Let's just plan on doing this once a month because there's so much going on. It's really hard to keep track of it otherwise. And
we're never going to run out.
No, I wish we could. I wish it could just be all good news, and we would never run out of that. But it's just not going to happen. I suppose it is kind of is what it is. And then what I'd also like you to do. Where are you? Where's your office?
It starts down at the Mexican border. It ends at the Oregon border.
No, I'm at the office. Okay, CRPA offices. Where are you in? Are you in Orange County? Or
we're in Fullerton, California.
Okay, well, you're not that far from me.
No, I would love to come down and visit you at your location.
Yeah, or why don't I come to you?
That'd be fine too.
For that matter. I mean, I do. Believe it or not, they gave me a driver's license.
Wow, we could actually do both. I could come down and see you.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's absolutely. So we'll set that up, and we'll have more updates for you along the way. So thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being on the show, and I'm looking forward to you coming back. Thank you very much for watching. If you've hung with us this long, I mean, we really went long on this, then wow, you are a Second Amendment supporter. Very, very grateful. Have a wonderful week. Wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.